This channel is for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions. This is Joe Rabil with Invest Like a Pro. And what I want to do today is go back through an old exercise that I used to do on a regular basis when I really wanted to hone in my skills trading. And so this is actually a part of the course. I mentioned this as a way to learn if you're going to learn an indicator, or if you want to learn the bars or price structure or anything like that. This is the process that I would go through. So let's go ahead and get into this because I'm not sure exactly how long this is going to take. What I decided to do, I picked Yum Brand's daily chart. I wanted it to be a daily because there are actually more false signals you're going to find on a daily chart than you will on a weekly. And what I actually want you to do is accept the fact that you're not going to get it 100%, but it should give you a feel for the volatility and the sense of where the turning points are coming. And what I want you to do is start at the far right edge. So if you can see, I've got this red bar right here that I've got the mouse cursor over. I'm going to start from there. I'm going to take into account everything prior to this, but I'm not using MACD. I'm not using ADX. I'm not using volume. I've just got the 18 and the 40 on the daily chart, and I've overlaid a weekly 18. That's it. And so what I would commonly do this for is to understand what I'm seeing in terms of a price action and the price structure. And when I say price action, I'm basically talking about the candlesticks and its relationship to the short-term moving average. Again, a lot of this is covered in the course. But I do think if you're going to go about trying to learn a specific indicator, you want to take everything else off the chart except for price and that indicator. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm overlaying the moving averages to give me a little bit of confirmation on the price structure. But I'm really going to lean on what I'm seeing in the candles to help me determine what's going on. So let's go ahead and get going on this. So I've got this bar, and if you notice, it closed around the midpoint after being down and testing these prior lows. And in fact, yes, it did undercut those two prior bottoms. So that to me is a good sign that you can see what happened. We had this big up move here, and then a big down move here. I'm going to change my pencil. Hold on a second so you can see a little bit better. All right, so big up move here and a big down move here. So I know I've got some resistance up this way, or at least up towards this higher end here, because we gave back so much. Now, I don't have the higher time frames. I'm just doing this on one time frame. I want you to get good at seeing what's going on in a single time frame. Now, keep something in mind. I'm doing this on a daily chart, but if you can notice something that's taking place on a specific bar, and it happens to be on a monthly chart or a weekly chart, it's obviously going to have a lot of importance on what's taking place on the daily. So anyway, we have this little bottom action. Let's start going bar by bar. And now we have an inside bar. So I'm looking at this and I'm realizing we've broken the 18-week, but it's still rising. And the moving averages are pretty flat. We tried to undercut here and then rallied back up. I mean, I would say I'm more inclined to believe that we're in some kind of a range, with this being the upper end of the range and this being the lower end of the range, but possibly coming down to here as a lower end. So that's kind of my thesis right now. I'm not thinking buy or sell. There's no pattern developing right now. Everything is sideways, right? Okay, now we get a little bit of a move off of this undercut pattern, and you could really see this. If you go down to a smaller time frame, I bet you could see this rallied up, came back to the midpoint, and basically was an undercut and rally off of this little area. So you went up and came down in the same day and then rallied off that. And now we're moving up into some of these other moving averages. Now we're trying to push higher, but notice how it keeps failing at this 128 area or the 18-week line. If we can push through that, that could be a positive. But I do know I have some issues up here. So we're pushing up. Now it's pausing a little bit. I don't see anything significant other than the fact that we did form a little bit of a tail, probably around the 38% retracement so far. right? Now we're pulling back again, but notice there's another tail, bottoming tail that has developed. So I'm starting to feel like there's pretty good support underneath, although nothing significant has happened yet. Now, if you notice, this opened up here, tried to push higher, and then failed and came back down. So you have this sort of upthrust pattern, a failed breakout pattern, and that probably leads to another test of support down here. So now look at what we've got. We have come down and tested support, not all that far, but enough to form another tail and now come back. Now we've got a tail on top and a tail at the bottom. So we don't have any direction whatsoever. I mean, there's nothing going on right now, and there's really not enough room to trade in between this range. So we're doing nothing. And doing nothing is a trade. I mean, it is when you're a trader, you're taking action if you do nothing, if that makes any sense at all. In other words, you're making a decision to do nothing because there is no trade. And sometimes that's the absolute best thing you can do. Now, we have this green bar coming off of this after testing this tail here and the 40 again, and now we've rallied up, but we left a tail up top. You see what's going on. I mean, if you're watching this bar by bar, you can see we've got a lot of support underneath and we've got a lot of resistance overhead. There's just nothing to play with right now. So now we actually get a little bit more negative action because it doesn't leave much of a tail. We get a gap down and we break below the low of the 40 and these prior bars. Now, again, I sort of think there's pretty solid support here, 123 to 124. And if that doesn't hold, I'm thinking there's pretty good support underneath here. So that's my thesis. Now we have to see if what comes out on each bar changes that thesis. Does it weaken it or strengthen it? Now, that's strengthening my thesis. Do you see the next bar? You see what it did? It didn't follow through to the downside because we got all this support underneath. Not only that, we form a pretty good tail off the low with a gap up, and then it tried to push higher, but then couldn't follow through. Now, if you see what's happened now, this I think is pretty important because we had a test of this area, couldn't get through the 18, and then we actually get a gap down the next day that closes poorly in the low end of the range. Now, keep in mind, we have taken out these lows here, but we still have all of this support down here. So based on what I'm seeing, I don't think we have a trend in place at this point. Notice how the 18 is still above the 40. I don't usually expect a massive decline to take place from this position. Now, actually, it tries to push higher again, and it tries to get through the 18 and the 40 and gives it back and closes poorly. This is a little scary when you think about it because even though there's no follow through to the downside, look at the sellers. You can definitely see there's a selling problem overhead. Now, look at what's happened. We don't get, so who's winning this battle? Do you see how we've got all of this support underneath and we've got all of this resistance overhead? But instead of this following through and trying to get, after having a terrible bar like this, following through and trying to test this low, we actually get a gap up again and then a strong push to the upside. I think this is very bullish. If I see this taking place, I'm starting to think, okay, we've undercut these key lows here after testing this low. Tested this low after undercutting these. I'm probably thinking maybe it doesn't get through this on the first try, but I bet we're going up. Let's see what happens. So again, didn't get through it on the next try. We still have an 18-week that is causing serious problems. We haven't been able to close above it, and it sends off a pretty big red bar back to the downside. Now look at what happens though. So this is more of the second try to get through, right? We had a big red bar. I mean, this is sloppy action. I just picked out a specific stock I figured wouldn't have any trending, major trends, because I wanted to show you what happens when it's really crystal clear when there is a trend. Now look at what's happening. You see how we're clearing this area? This whole area here, this consolidation area, we're finally kind of breaking out above it. Now I can start to think about this as a potential trade, but there's nothing to do right now because we've had two big up bars through resistance, and I know I've got some resistance up here. So let's see how this plays out. Now we get too much follow through back up into this resistance area, right? And we'll have to see. I mean, the thing is that look at how far away this got from the 4. So I'm not convinced this is a big reversal pattern, although in the short term that could cause some consolidation. So now we're going sideways. Now we're pushing higher again. But let me just point something out. This is the first time since we started doing this through here that we got some kind of dynamic price action to the upside. I mean, this is pretty impulsive move. If I had the 80X up, I would be thinking that we got at least green DI to break out. So that's an encouraging sign, but we don't have a trade at this point. Now we're pulling back. Okay, so we get a strong move to the upside and we get 2 lower highs. Now I'm starting to think, okay, if we can get this a little bit closer to the 18, I would probably have an interest. It doesn't have to come all the way down, but it's a little too far. I have a feeling that if this tried to move right now, that it would probably form something like that just because it's a little too far away and you're into this resistance. Yes, strong move to the upside, but we've had some tails. You see a couple tails that have formed. So there is a little bit of resistance up there. And notice the gap down from this level. It closed up here and then gap from there. So I wouldn't expect it to just punch through 133 really quickly. Okay, so now we're consolidating sideways. Now, if we can get back above this 133.30, if I can get back above that bar, I might consider playing this because of the strong move to the upside. If I'm going to do that, I am leaning towards there being a stop somewhere down in here. And why is that? Because I just don't want to I don't want a situation where I go up and I'm kind of right. It comes back down again and then goes and hits my target to the upside. So I don't want to see something like that where it goes up, comes back down, maybe takes me out if I put a tight stop in. So I want to keep track of this, but I also don't want to miss this move necessarily because, again, I might not have much if I'm looking at this stock only. So strong move to the upside and we're getting a pullback. So let's see. So I would probably say I'd want to be in this as a trigger because we have some dynamics behind it. Now, remember, we have this resistance here, but we pushed up against it and we pulled back. And this is pretty far away. So if it had gone up and come right back down and we were right up against it, very close, then maybe not so attracted to that. But we're above all of our key moving averages for the 2 time frames. The only negative I see is that we're a little stretched away from the moving averages. And so now we have the potential for this to come back and test a little bit more. Now we get this undercut pattern. So the question is, so you can see what happened. Now we've undercut this low, but we're still above a rising 18, which is above a rising 40. Now that weekly is flat, but we are above that line. So I'm still feeling okay about this trade because I gave it a little extra room. If we get an upturn from here, I'm going to come right up underneath this now. Okay, that's how I would look at this because I don't want to risk too much in this trade once I see what's going on. Now we get a really strong move and it not only goes up, but it exceeds the high of this one. I'm definitely coming down below this low as a stop. And we're going to see if we get any follow through or if I'm going to take a small loss here. Now we're starting to get follow through. We've got up, a gap up, and now another up day. That's 3. Remember, 3 to 5. Now, this is more of a pause bar, but what I would probably be doing is looking at this saying, you know what? I mean, we're up 3 days and then we tried to break out. If this comes back down through here, I'd give it a little room underneath this bar. But if this comes down through here, I'd probably just, I would raise my stop to that level and just call it a day. Let's keep going. And we get a monster bar. Now I'm up 4 of the last 5 days with a monster bar. Now, I might not take it on this bar, but I'm probably looking to take profits on the next bar. And now I definitely want to take profits on that. And what I would have probably done is as this moved to a new high and then came back down through here, I would be looking to take a profit as it comes back down through the high of that big bar. So I've had I've got a move where you go through a consolidation phase, you kind of see what's happening, but you're not getting jerked around. You're not getting in and you're not getting out because nothing is happening. And then we finally get some kind of a move to the upside. And if you understand the distance from the 18, and sometimes you have to give it a little extra room. I learned this the hard way. I used to put a stop here every single time, and then I'd see it go hit my target. So I'm very conscious of this fact. You can learn from my mistakes. This happened to me for a pretty long time early on in my career. And so if I know I've got momentum in my favor, and I'm assuming I do based on the price action here, even though I don't have let me actually do this. Let's just see. Look at what took place. So during this sideways action, you look at the ADX formation. You see how we had low ADX and all three lines were below zero? Look at how the MACD wasn't doing anything. And then we finally got a move to the upside. MACD goes and confirms. Green DI gets going. And then when we get the pullback, you're actually holding. Green DI is holding here. So, I mean, I got to tell you, I think that was the good trade. And then again, when I see a monster bar 3 to 5, now I'm looking at this as a trade, obviously. I'm not looking to trend trade or anything like that. I was looking for an opportunity to trade. This is how I'd go about. This is really good practice. And this is how I'd suggest going through bar by bar this way. So obviously, if you look at what I went through there and you look at the trade, and if you were to look at the risk reward of that trade, where how much I risked versus how much I actually made, you know, you'd be questioning that. But this is more about learning the analysis. This isn't necessarily the trading techniques. It's where you're thinking and voicing your thoughts of what you're seeing and understanding, like, even though that was not really good risk reward, it was handled perfectly. I entered it. I gave it the proper amount of room. Now, maybe you wouldn't have taken that first trade and you would have waited for the undercut to kick in and then taken the second entry. Nothing wrong with doing that. But I wanted to make sure I got a trade on it. This wasn't rehearsed or anything. I was just going through bar by bar, and I did want to make sure I got something on to show you. And I actually, having that big monster bar was really good because I was running out of time. And if you look at what happened there, it ran up and then ended actually it topped out a couple days later and had a pretty big drop. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful. Go ahead and post any questions or comments. Thanks.